And welcome to another episode of I Rise with Sal. Today on my show, we'll be discussing a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. It's on friendships. They say the greatest gift of life can be true friends, and friends can truly bring out the best in us. As we grow through, from childhood through adulthood, friends change over time based on where we are in our life. You start to have work friends, neighborhood friends, childhood friends of friends, and navigating all these relationships can be quite hard sometimes. It's also important to understand how to create boundaries in friendships and how to evolve with friends over time and how to be a better friend and build a strong, healthy friendship. Discussing all these topics with the amazing Sandhya Krishnan with us. And Sandhya has joined us before on modern dating and relationships. So we're so excited to have you, Sandhya. And I'd love to start chatting a little bit about your background and then diving into these topics.
Hi, Saloni. I'm always excited to chat with you. Thank you for having me on again. I am a life coach, a wellness coach, and really more than anything else, I think if I had to niche myself, which I try never to, it would be about personal mastery. That's really about us getting to know ourselves better and really to understand what we have agency over. It makes it a lot easier to be able to understand patterns and people and the world around us. Okay. But it always begins with us. So I think that would be like my core area if there were one. I will say over the last 2 years, relationships have really come to the forefront, not least because we've been, enclosed in relatively small spaces with people that we just were habitually partners with but never actually spent a lot of time with, which made us get to know each other a lot better. We were also separated from the people that we would have spent a lot of time with, like our friends, and we've also been through tumult, at which is a great point for us to find out who's with us, who's not with us, and are they doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
So a lot of questions have come up over the last 2 years from my clients. I could have clients that are in the leadership space and they're still grappling with emotions, right? We can be sort of very functional and very self-aware on certain fronts, but there's some things that we just don't stop to question, and those become blind spots or pain points, potential pain points for us when things don't go our way. So yes, I'm very excited to explore this with you.
Amazing. So, really starting off, as we move from our, childhood through our teens, through our 20s and 30s, our friendships change and evolve based on where we are in our life, and our geography, our interests. And then you also have certain kinds of people who are really stuck within their same social group since childhood. Why does that sort of happen, and how does one sort of like deal with that? And a sidebar to that is, as you evolve, I've seen like you lose a lot of friendships to, relationships, to marriage, potentially children. So like, how does one sort of work through all of that?
Okay, there were many, many questions in that. Let me see if I can pass through a few of them. Okay, I'll do short answers first, and then feel free to deep dive into any one of the threads that we can pick up on. Uh, the first part of it is why do we transition through different kinds of friendships, is because we grow, we change, circumstances change, our priorities change, and very often like our headspace changes. We only have finite amount of bandwidth or body budget, as the neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett says, and within that very finite attention, energy, all of which is constantly being competed for by so many extraneous factors. Friendship is just one of those things, and for some people it does feature higher, for others perhaps lower. Some may need more work, some just happen effortlessly. So there are many reasons why friendships change and orient, and our own priorities change over time. To the part of why, how do some people manage to sort of stay in the same group or clan or friendship for decades on end, I will say it could be, again, from the outside, we'll never be able to judge, but in rare occasions, it's because all the members of that group are allowing each other to grow and be themselves and still feel a sense of belonging to that tribe, that group. It's like a loose social structure that's created, right? Like we formed our own little clan, even if we're all staying in different places or whatever. But more often than not, this staying together happens just because of and this will sound cruel to say, but like sort of inertia. Actually, if we think about it, much of our lives is lived based on inertia. And inertia is not just stagnation. You could be stationary and you will continue to be stationary. You could be moving in a particular path and you will continue moving in that same path unless acted on by an external opposing force. So if there is no great jhatka or shock or anything that orients or reorients or changes you, and for the rest of that clan, there's no reason why things shouldn't go exactly as they always did. But that rarely happens. Usually it does take some amount of effort. It could just be the accident that all of you, every member of that clan just happened to stay in the same geography. It's just the most convenient thing to do. Again, it comes down to inertia. And why don't we explore further on different priorities of like marriage, and
Yes,
maybe we
absolutely.
break that up into smaller bits. I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. Because I've been like, a lot of the times I tell my friends I lose so many friends to relationships. So I'd love to dive into that.
Sure. If you're talking about why friendships change, like once you get into a romantic relationship, why
Mhm.
why why do we sometimes lose out, or why are we on the outside of a friendship when there is a friend may get into a
Yes,
romantic.
that, and like even if like are those relationships even salvageable? Because I know at the early stage of a relationship, there's always wanting to be together for a certain amount of time, but then you also start to realize what your priorities are, what your boundaries are, and then things start to normalize. So I've seen it happen both ways. So just trying to sort of navigate that.
Okay. Love is a many a splendid thing, as a song from the 60s or 70s go, but love is also a very strange beast, mind you. It's very very it could, some parts of it come from a very very primitive part of our brain. And so, for example, if I were to develop a crush on somebody, it's typically my amygdala that's getting activated, and I'm starting to hyper focus on this particular person, primarily on all of their good qualities or whatever I perceive as attractive to them. God help if, I mean, and this gives us like a massive dopamine rush, right? Now, it it's going to be very hard for a plain vanilla good old friendship, which we've already developed a certain amount of neural blindness to sort of
Yeah.
compete with that level of headiness. Now, this usually comes, I will say that it's not for us to judge somebody that's going through that experience. It could be a wonderful, heady experience, but as a good friend, if you're on the outside watching this, you could also be able to see things that your friend in love slash lust slash hyper focus will not be able to see. And perhaps you need to define then, how can I best support this friend who is, think of that person as a person whose brain is temporarily on crack cocaine. Okay,
Yeah.
so they're in the middle of an addictive episode,
Yeah.
and you're sitting on the outside of this watching, and if you can see a train wreck happen, you might need to intervene as a good friend. Or
Yeah.
sometimes the best thing you can do for them is just to wait for that episode to pass, because the highest of highs rarely will last more than a few months. That sort of like hijack, will that dopamine rush rarely lasts more than a few weeks or a few months. I think like 12 to 18 months is the longest recorded. Beyond that, usually people will calm down, and then it's about everyday thoughts and behaviors, and that's when they'll start to miss all of the other things that they sort of lost focus of. That's one part of it. The other part is also that in when you form a relationship, in a sense you're starting a new unit, again, if I loosely use the language of Hindu philosophy, it's like the first 25 years of your life are brahmacharya. That's like your student learner phase. The next 25 years or something like that is your grihastha phase. It's like your homemaking, nesting phase. And there, the primary unit becomes the partnership, all right, or the couple. And so, if you had to start to prioritize, again, this might sound cruel, but if you're now starting your own family, for example, this partner becomes literally your partner, your primary partner. Which is not to say that the other people in your life, the other people in your village aren't important, but this will take precedence, and it can be somewhat hurtful for the person to whom, like, if we were if we were BFFs or two halves that made one whole, it can be quite heart wrenching, gut wrenching to be torn apart from that and form for somebody to form another um, half in that sense, or whatever it is that they may define it as. But we have to also recognize the role that friendship plays, where partnership, if you want to call it a traditional marriage or whatever, these relationships do evolve. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the worse. It can change the quality. You may not spend, you know, nights together, but your interactions can become so much more meaningful. You might actually be forced to take a pause and think about what this person means for you in your life, what you and they can do together, perhaps to bring value, what strengths you bring together, how you nurture each other and help each other grow. So I'll say that it could be, it's painful, but it could be inevitable in some respects, but it could also be the best thing that could happen for the relationship. You know,
Yeah.
we need that external opposing force sometimes to wake up and say, whoa, what's going on here? Let me take a good look that I haven't looked at for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to reassess the friendships in your life with time and through different phases. You know, coming back to that point, you know, there are certain friends who are your friends because you're seemingly doing well. And, you know, when things go haywire, they completely off the radar. And, you know, you also have certain friends who are who consider you socially more important, which is why they're your friend. How does one deal with this?
I've always found that question to be very, very fascinating myself, and sort of I've been on the, you know, having been on the outside where you've literally walked into a party and somebody sort of gauged you for where you stand in social circumstance. I've literally seen someone like gaze over me, and I'm quite small, so it's very easy to gaze over me and start to look out for the next person to look out for because I wasn't socially acceptable enough or whatever, right? So this actually goes down to our very, very early tribal sort of thinking. It was always, you always wanted to align to like the leader of the tribe or the more dominant members of the tribe, because that meant you had a better chance of belonging to the tribe. You had a better chance of getting favors from, you know, when somebody brought in the kill or whatever, you'd come first in line to get part of that kill. And that mindset has never left us. And if you think about it, Saloni, look at like an actor, for example, right? So many famous people, celebrities, have talked about how when they were first starting out in the industry, nobody would give them time of day, and yet when they became famous overnight, everybody wanted a piece of them, wanted to be in the same photograph as them, you know, wanted to invite them to their parties. Childhood friends that you know might have bullied them or excluded them from their gangs suddenly say that, oh, you know, we went to school together, he was my best friend, he was this. We want to associate, and I think the way to deal with this is to, easier said than done, but to not get emotional about this. When you're able to see these as patterns, that look, this is tribal behavior, these are tribes people behaving as tribes people would do, you know. And just, but then to also say that, look, if I'm enjoying a dominant position today, I probably shouldn't let it get to my head, because I know that fame is fickle, and, you know, fair weather friends, and there exist songs and quotes and aphorisms all for a reason, because this has happened through the millennia. So to treat both success and failures as the fickle friends that they are, as the imposters as they are, as a very famous quote goes, is really just to say, you know, with equanimity, that I am solitary. We are essentially alone, Saloni. You know, even our lifelong partner, our parents, our children, who we feel like ours, and we'll never lose the love of. I hate to say it, we will lose it one day. We just don't want to think about it, and we're hoping like that day will never happen. Or we say things like, "I hope I die before you do, so I'll never know the pain of not loving you." But we know that it must end, and so we think of it as like, you know, you're riding essentially what is a solitary path. Self-love, self-acceptance, all of those sort of feel-good words, they really do exist for a reason. And there are people that will join you for a particular time, and there are people who will join you when things are going well, which is not to say that you cannot form new relationships with them, but that they perhaps never even saw you before you came up into the limelight, or they didn't have the ability, which is not to say that they cannot bring some other kind of value to their life. I think
True.
that's the other fallacy that we have. We believe that all friendships should have the same degree of intimacy, should have the same degree of trust, should have the same degree of reciprocity. Reciprocity again comes from our very, very tribal roots. I will do this for you in the hope that you will do it back for me, or you will do it. When I ask you for something, you will give me grain from your heart or whatever. That's really where reciprocity comes in, right?
Yeah.
One way to sort of create awareness around that, I think, is to actually take pause and to think of yourself as the center of a of of I'll say like concentric circles. Like you have these
Mhm.
concentric circles that the Zen people
Yeah.
draw on the I mean in the sand, and you're at the center of that. You need to ask yourself, where does my tribe stand? Where is my village today? Where will I place them? I'm at the center of the constellation because you are all you know, and you are all that you have agency over, right? Not necessarily that heliocentric, not that you're the most important, but really that this is all that you have control over. And just to be able to observe people, that look, I see that this person is a snake. There is nothing good or bad, but this is a snake. A snake will display snake-like qualities. There's no need to sort of hate or try and beat the snake away or whatever. A snake has a very important role to play in nature. Know where the snake must fit into your circle as well.
Yeah.
So to kind of place people, not everybody has to have, we, like I said, all of the fallacies that we have of intimacy, closeness, reciprocity need not necessarily be the grounds for every kind of friendship, you
Yes,
know?
that's very true because I think sometimes I placed all my friends as having equal importance. So there should be an equal amount of trust, reciprocity, and all of that. But when you go through a situation where certain friend will walk over you, or like you feel sort of used in a sort of relationship, I think that's when you realize that okay, let's take a step back and observe who is in my tribe, who falls within that level of importance, and who really is sort of a bystander and they're sort of more as an acquaintance. It's really important to reassess those friendships from time to time.
Absolutely. And I'll reiterate, Saloni, that it's very hard for us to actually attribute motive to another person.
Yes.
Even behavior that seems hurtful or seems cruel, um, we can only take a guess at what the motivation for that might be. I often say this, which is that never attribute malice to something that can just as easily be explained by idiocy or ignorance, or I'll say helplessness. Something as simple as a friend that doesn't pick up a call late night when you're in anguish. Our first thought will probably be, oh my god, they don't love me anymore, or they
Yeah.
don't care anymore, but we have no idea what's going on really with them in
Absolutely.
that moment. And yes, are we getting more distracted? Are we getting somewhat siloed in our existence? Are we getting perhaps somewhat more clannish? To some extent we probably are, but actually as humanity we do seem to be getting more other regarding. And perhaps people might say that, look, I will say this to you as well, which is that if you have goals for yourself and you know that your time and energy are finite, I'll ask you, Saloni, in the 24 hours that you have in your day, or 168 hours that you have in your week, where would you be placing that time and energy? And there will be some tribe members who will keep calling for, Saloni, I need your time, I need your attention. And if you say yes to that, you'll be saying no to something that's far more important for you, that takes your life forward in the direction that you want it to go. And at the
Yeah.
end of life, honestly, you only have yourself to answer to, not not
Yeah.
to not to any other tribe member.
That's a great point, and that actually goes into the topic of setting boundaries with certain friends. You have friends who are givers and takers, and from the takers, it's really important to understand, should you confront them, cancel them, just let them be in your life, but also give only certain amounts and pieces of yourself to them. So I think that truly answers that sort of question about where you stand with them. Let's just sort of like understand where they are and give only certain amounts of yourself to them when you need to.
Yes, for sure. I'll also say that people are rarely binary, Saloni. Sometimes, patterns creep in as well. there is a lovely concept called the game create. I mean, this was proposed by a wonderful psychologist called Eric Berne, and you might recognize this in some relationship in your life or the other. We almost all have a game going, which is that the game is above all else, it's an unconscious pattern of behavior. So you're most likely not aware even when it's happening. Okay, and typically the game will have a few players, 3 or 4, but it needs, like, you can't play the game in isolation. You can't clap with just one hand. Okay, so usually the game will have like a victim, and for if there has to be a victim, there has to be a persecutor. Okay, and so sometimes the victim needs to find a persecutor to become the victim,
Yeah.
right? And then there will be sometimes a rescuer, that's the third person, and there could be a fourth who's like the observer, who's not a completely neutral person either, but who's sort of on the sidelines watching the whole game unfold. And all these roles are reversible and interchangeable. Very so simple example would be that you see a friend in some sort of pain or dilemma, and you go in to say, hey, listen, are things okay with you? I want to help you. Is there something I can do? And that person just snaps back at you and says that, you know what, leave me alone, you'll never understand my pain. They've just become the persecutor, and guess what happens? You or I will become the victim. And we're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what did I do? How can you treat me like this? This, and it becomes all about us without us even pausing to understand why this person is, i- i- you know, attacked us in that sense. So
Yeah.
even with something as binary as a giver and taker, very often these are life positions that we take, and could very well come from our past, or whatever, where we've been taught things like always look out for others, be kind to others, never refuse help to somebody. These are wonderful values that we internalize, but exercised unthinkingly, they put us in these positions of helplessness.
Yeah.
So I'll say to you that nobody can be a taker to you without your permission. So it's
Very well said. You allow yourself to be taken for a ride. That's very, very well said. Um, Going into like the topic of, some friendships are not balanced. Like you might think that they're your best friend, but they might not feel the same way. Have you sort of like encountered situations like that, and what do you do when that happens?
I think at the crux of that is the idea of reciprocity on the one hand, but also a sense of lack within us. Okay? I need you to be my best friend. I need you to prioritize me above all else so that I feel loved and I feel safe in this relationship. Okay? I don't want to share you with anybody else because you belong to me. Okay, so it's a lot about attachment, possession, and that I'm giving you my everything, and the other person will be like, but I never asked you for everything, on the one hand. So I'll say that it begins with really us looking at ourselves and how we form these attachments, and what we are we using that friendship as a crutch to complete us, to make ourselves feel whole, to make ourselves feel validated. Because at the end of the day, again, like I said, we're just part of a larger web. Um, will I just go running if my mom calls me, or will I go running when my lover calls me? I will, but I still expect my best friend to be there whenever I need them, right? So
Yeah.
none of these are necessarily very rational decisions. The more easy way to sort of check ourselves, I always say, is anything that causes a metabolic arousal in us, feelings of like discomfort, feelings of anxiousness, feelings of fear, or like a racket feeling that, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me again. This happened with my past relationship, this happened with my present relationship. Usually there's a pattern that you're feeling. I'll say it's a racket feeling that, oh my God, why does this always happen to me? Good time to take a pause and ask yourself how you are engaging, how you are contacting that person, you know
Yeah.
and rule of thumb will always be that the more you sort of hyper focus on just one person, the more you are giving them the keys to your happiness and your equanimity.
Yeah.
And you're also keeping it external to yourself. Here, take my car and you drive it. Now if you decide to go at like 120 miles an hour, fine, I'll just get dragged along helplessly behind you, and I'll have no control over that. And you need to ask yourself, where do you want to go, in your life. And a good thing to ask a friend is, are you going to go my way? Should we ride together?
Yeah, and I think a large part of it comes from like being self-assured as a person. Once you start to have, various interests, hobbies, activities, and you're really sort of, you're living a very full life, the dependency starts to reduce. And then it's sort of more of an equal relationship. And I think that's what we should all strive towards, like an equal friendship.
Mm, absolutely. There's no substitute for developing yourself as a whole personality rather than thinking of yourself as one half and waiting for your soulmate or other half to come and join you, which we discussed even in romantic love and romantic friendships. But also, I'll say there is space for a little bit of self-compassion, Saloni. This just tells us that we're human, and as humans, we seek that intimacy. We want somebody to share our secrets with. We want to be able to
Yeah.
expose our, take off our armor and just be our vulnerable, childlike self and say, listen, will you love me even though you can see my ugly side, even though you can see my warts, even though you can see me without makeup on? You know,
Mm.
it's nice to see what's at the heart of that craving. Uh, um,
Yeah.
it's very often just that feeling of intimacy and that feeling of having my special someone. Um, but if the person that you want is not the person that can give that to you, then maybe you need to widen your search, and maybe it could be two people that will fulfill that need in you. Perhaps
Yeah.
just there is no
Yeah.
one soulmate, there may be no one BFF in our life.
Yeah, I think that's very true because I personally feel like I don't have one BFF. I have many close friends, and they all fulfill certain needs. And we can be silly together and goofy together, but at the same time, they all sort of we have different kinds of conversations, and they all offer different perspectives on things. And I think that's really important to have like a good tribe where like you are growing with them as we both grow together, and you can be as silly, intimate, vulnerable, whatever personality of yourself with them. So that's been a huge part of my life personally. um
Actually, if you don't mind, you actually touched on something very important, which is that it's important to have a wide variety of friends as well, Saloni. Because
yeah.
if all of our friends are similar to us, as you said, where's the growth? If we're
Yeah.
all if we're all just mirror images of each other, as we tend to do sometimes when we're in school. You want to hang out with people that seem like us because there's safety in familiarity, but in the zone of safety, there's very little growth.
Yeah.
Growth usually happens in the zone of slight discomfort. So there's the zone of comfort, and familiarity. Then there's the zone of slight discomfort where you're stepping a few steps outside of, hey, I noticed that we have two different views maybe on politics. Okay, maybe a bad choice to start with, but but can I hear your views, and would you like to hear mine? Or just in terms of
Mhm.
ideas, spirituality, religion, another Pandora's box.
Touchy
But
topic, yeah.
but to be able to hear and look, grow and feed off of each other.
Yeah.
Too far out, and it's the zone of fear. At which point your guard will very likely be up. So like if you're matched like on a blind date, for example, with no context to the other person in friendship or in dating, it can be very, very intimidating because you don't know what can set off a Tinder bomb, which will actually lead to you getting cancelled. We
Yeah.
so fear being judged, we so fear being cancelled, we so fear being ejected from the tribe. So I'll say that the zone of discomfort is a great place to explore new friendships. You don't necessarily have to dive off a cliff and bungee jump to say, whoa, I'm going to try something completely new either. That can be
Yeah.
pretty terrifying.